Actually inflation has started to go up. If all our inputs, domestic inputs also have started to go up. Primarily, two reasons. I think again, a short-term strategy continued into the medium term has created this. In the short term, obviously the government had no choice but to print money and keep the sectors floating around. However, because it has continued beyond a certain time frame, now it has started to lead to inflation, because you have now a situation where there is a lot of money chasing after a few goods, and that has created inflation coming in. If the prices were raised at the right time, then you would have found that you could have curtailed to some extent inflation. And one of the areas that I believe that is a problem is fuel. By continuing to keep fuel prices low, our imports have continued to grow, and then the international prices have started to go, and this has created the imbalance between imports and exports as well. Then short-term financing requirements. So as a result of this, obviously the government's in its strategy made sure that the interest rates came down. They gave capital loans at very low rates. The banks and the fact that they were flooding the market also ensured that the interest rates were kept down. Government also kept its interest rate down, where 3 months, 6 months treasury bills, it was keeping it at about 5% or so, which basically helped people to procure loans at a lower rate. However, what is happening in the last month or so, you will see that the interest rates have started to go up. Now the short-term rates are about, if you look at the bid and ask price, it's hovering in the 6 to 7%, and the longer-term rates are going at about 12%. Earlier it was 6% and about 9% or 8%. So you can see overall the yield curve or the interest curve is starting to pick up, and then it will, I think, continue to do so. So the government will have now to take a decision on what it is trying to go, what it is going to manage. Is it going to manage the exchange rate, or is it going to manage the interest rate? Now, I don't think, from the little knowledge I have, you can manage both to keep it low. Not going to be possible. And the third one is, of course, inflation. Now, you can't have all three of these indicators going down. When one goes down, something else has to give. So as to how long the government can hold this position will be also an interesting factor to look at. In the meantime, government, in order to address this whole dollar crisis, it is now going into various countries and trying to negotiate various things. The papers, you would have seen that they're trying to negotiate a loan with, I think, Oman, $3.5 million, which will hopefully, if that works out by December, it will address to some extent our import bill, and by doing that, it will relieve the pressure on the settlement of these imports and make that currency available for other imports. So that those are strategies that the government is trying to do at the moment. As to when and how successful that is your guess is as good as mine. But obviously, the rating agencies don't seem to think too much of these strategies, because if you notice, Moody's 2 days ago downgraded Sri Lanka again to CCC 2 or something like that. So the downgrading, which basically is indicative of the strains that we are having in trying to negotiate some of these deals. Now, in the meantime, remember, there is a third factor that is happening. So our foreign inflows have declined, our imports have increased. To compound this problem, we also had to make good on some of the liabilities which were coming off a maturity, which is primarily the international sovereign bonds. And the bigger problem is, since 2015, our percentage of international sovereign bonds have increased compared to multilateral and bilateral loans. Now, if for many of you all, what does this mean is, when you say multilateral and bilateral, mean these are loans either taken from countries or from institutions like World Bank and all. Now, it's one-to-one type of transactions. Whereas when you talk of international sovereign bonds, these are loans taken from the market from individual investors. So when you try to negotiate settlement plans, you can negotiate settlement plans with individuals, but it's very difficult to negotiate with the market. So that is why, and then the next problem is, since 2015, our ratio of multilateral and individual loans to ISBs have changed. Today, we have about 18% of our borrowings are in the form of international sovereign bonds. So when these come up for repayment, you have to somehow or other find the money to repay this, because negotiating for a repayment reschedulement is not easy when it is a traded bond. So that is basically a snapshot of where we are. So I don't think I'm not trying to make a gloomy situation or whatever it is. Yes, these are facts in the sense these are things that are there. So now the question and the strategy is how do we navigate through all these circumstances, right? So some of the things that one has to look at is, first of all, I think we need to survive the tsunami, right? When the tsunami came, also this country went through. One good thing about our country is that over the years, we have shown a certain degree of resilience to various shocks. 2019, we had the Easter attacks. Then 20, we had COVID. Before that, we had a 30-year war. So we have had these kinds of shocks right through our economy. I suppose many businesses, since they have weathered these through various ups and downs, have also is resilient enough to go through these shocks. So survival in the short term is critical, because this problem will sort itself out, in my view. Of course, we will never be able to gain the $8 billion or whatever we have lost on tourism, even if tourism picks up in 2022. If we get what we are supposed to get, which is about $3.5 to $4 billion, we are certainly not going to get $6 billion to catch up the $8 billion we have lost. I don't think that's realistic to even think about. Yes, our tourism inflows will improve for sure, but remember, there will be a lot of competition also, because like us, many other countries also will start opening up, and there will be a lot more opportunities, and I'm sure there will be some form of price cutting as well going on to capture these capture the inflows. So government will have to come up with a strategy how to basically plug that dollar hole through either negotiations. And you would have also seen the common thing about the government is that they are saying go to IMF, go to IMF. My personal view is I don't think that is really a solution. Yeah, maybe we will have to go to IMF at some point, but IMF is going to bring about certain difficulties in managing the local economy. Whether those can, whether our people are willing to stomach those or not, I don't know. So they will have to look at other opportunities also to see. Also, when you go to the IMF, we need to have a game plan. And I don't think at this particular junction, we have a game plan even to go to IMF. So that is another area that I think we need to closely monitor. So from your industry point of view, surviving this tsunami is one thing. So that is why short term, we will have to see how the business needs to be restructured in order to ride this wave, right? So first thing would be, I think, probably negotiating with the bankers or whoever it is to obtain short and medium term funding. I wouldn't necessarily go for too much of short term funding, because this problem is going to be there for the medium term. So you need to look at what the size of the problem and make sure that the funding is available. Otherwise, you will always be firefighting. Right? The next thing is you need to seriously relook at your businesses and see where the excess fat can be trimmed down. Now, when things were good, obviously, you would have taken the, you would have taken an easy, not easy, but you would have been a bit more liberal in your spending patterns, various things like that. So those need to be relooked and try to make sure that you operate at the bare minimum cost. But one thing I must advise you to please make sure that any investment plans, you should not hold back on those, because those will have an impact again in the medium to long term. Then you need to also make sure that you retain value adding activities that are directly attributable for the survival of the business. So one of the things that Sri Lankan government keeps telling about foreign FDIs, that is foreign direct investments. One thing that you have to understand is what is the value proposition Sri Lanka offers. We are not close to any raw materials. we do not have a market size for someone to actually start producing here and sell, right? So we can't attract those FDIs. But I believe there is a strategic advantage where we are located. We are located close to India. So we need to see how we can work our whatever we are doing with India, because India internally has a lot of issues when it comes to its domestic economy. So that is one area. So like, say, for example, what Hong Kong is to mainland China, or many of these places have, I think, Indonesia now to Southeast Asia. So like that, we also need to see how we can position ourselves, because we have a large economy right next door. So what opportunities it is there, and how we position is something that strategically we'll have to see. Another area, the problem with government's FDI, this thing is, in my personal view, is that, for any FDI to come into this country and invest, you have to have a stable policy framework. And Sri Lanka has never had a stable policy framework. The reason for that is, I think, our political scenario, where every 5 years we have a reset. We go to elections. So every 5 years, this policy keeps changing up and down, and we don't have a long-term policy. Now, many countries, if you see, who have has developed because they have very clear-cut long-term policies. Take Singapore or any other economy that has really developed. So because of that, we have an inherent problem. So that is something. So I mean, think about it. If you were going to invest in a project which is going to recover in 20 years, would you put that money in? Because you don't know after 5 years what the policy will be, right? So that in my view is a problem. Problem the country has. I don't know how we are going to get out of it, but I think we have to address this if we want to continue to attract foreign investments. The next issue would be trying to negotiate terms with your suppliers, foreign suppliers. Now, there you may want to look at strategies like, say, individually, all of you all may not necessarily be large. Then can you get together and figure out a combined operation, where the combined operation will become substantial, and the suppliers will have to take note of that combined supply. So that's something that you need to explore. Then another thing that you may want to explore is, can we source some of the materials that we are importing domestically? Because the import restrictions are there, but if those materials can be sourced locally, meaning at least produced locally or sourced locally, then that is one area that needs to be explored. The third area is on account of the banks. I think you need two things that you need to figure out is, one is on the cost of funding. That means procuring the right funding requirements to ensure that your business continues in the medium term. Then the next issue is, in order for your sales, is there a possibility of invoicing and recovering in foreign currency? So that will hedge to some extent your exposure when it comes to your costs, as well as it will also give you a stream of foreign exchange for you to use in your inputs. Then you have So the next one that you need to probably look at it is, as I mentioned earlier, revisiting your cost structures and the way you conduct business. So you need to do a zero-based analysis and see, is this the best way to conduct my business given the new normal time? The other issue that you may also want to look at it is that I believe, from what I gathered, your main customers tend to be in the export industry, like, say, for example, tea or garments. If you're supplying to them, then you need to either be able to invoice in dollars and recover in dollars, or you need to come to arrangements with these people where they can provide some of the dollars that they are earning for the supply of your material. So that is something that is worth pursuing. So these are some of the things that I think you need to think about it's no point in trying to figure out that. One of the things is no point in trying to figure out that this crisis is going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change tomorrow. It will be there, I think, in the shorter term, because looking at the figures, unless the government is able to procure a substantial amount of foreign exchange through either a loan or some negotiation of settlement terms, it's going to be rather difficult. This crisis is going to be there for a while. Of course, it is enhanced by the fact that our tourism inflows are taking longer than we anticipated to start to move. So now the country is they're trying to open it out, hopefully for I think the December season. But one of the problems is that is now people will have to go and attract tourists to come. You still have problems with the airports, which are still not open. Countries are still not giving the green light. So there are inherent problems. So whether they will overnight change, I don't know, but it will take a bit of time for it to get normalized to some extent. So all these things, I think, needs to be very carefully evaluated. So you need to ensure and have a strategic plan in mind. If this crisis goes on for a while, then what happens? Now people are also talking about this another variant that is coming. So you don't know. Another 3 months time, we might end up going for another lockdown or whatever it is. We can't afford to do it, but this is a health crisis, and depends on how we want to tackle. One of the problems I've seen is in Sri Lanka now, some of these other countries are looking at it more pragmatically, and they are opening out. Even a country like New Zealand, which locked down completely, is now finding it difficult because the cases are going up. So countries like Singapore are taking a pragmatic view on this and saying that no, by November we will not call this a pandemic, we'll call it an endemic, and then move on. So we will have to take, but in Sri Lanka, what happens is sometimes there are societal pressures which prevents us from going in some of those strategies. So it will be interesting to see how these will be tackled in the near term. But clearly, I think we need to embrace ourselves to the new normal. We need to ensure that in that new normal, we have to have a very clear-cut strategy as to how we are going to function and do our business. So with that, I will finish my session and probably give it to Hiranti and Johan to continue with the other two areas. And after that, we will have a discussion, and anyone who has any issues, we will discuss to see how some of these things can be addressed given today's condition. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I hope I have laid the foundation and for you all to start thinking about, and we will discuss how if you have any specific areas in these in this whatever I have presented, we will discuss and see how we can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manal Jayasinghe, for sharing with us your perspectives on how we can manage cost of production as a result of the US dollar crisis and current market conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be having the Q&A a little later on towards the end of our presentations. So I do hope you will keep your questions ready for that segment. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, as I already mentioned to you at the beginning of our program, for the benefit of all our members, each of our presentations this morning will be translated in both Sinhala and Tamil. So for now, let's start off with the Sinhala translation. We have our past president here at SLAP, Mr. Dilan Silva, who will do the Sinhala translation.
Stuti, thank you. Api Sakacha Karakari, Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, Sakacha Karakabege, Podama Anuna de Nang, Ernst & Young audit firm के स्टाफ में पार्टनर केनेक हैटियता सीनियर पार्टनर हैटियता ते वगेම උපදේශක හැටියට කටයුතු කරන මහා බැංකුවේ භාණ්ඩාගාරයේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ඉතින් ඒක තුල තමයි මේ විශේෂ ශක්තියක් බලයක් අපිට තියෙන මේක ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් මේකෙන් කිව්වේ දෙයක් තමයි අපිට මේ කාලය ඇවිල්ලා තීරණාත්මක කාලයක් අපි ව්‍යාපාර කරන කට්ටිය. ඒකේ තියෙන ලොකුම ප්‍රශ්නය තමයි අපිට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ හැටියට තියෙන ලොකුම ගැටලුව තමයි ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ආර්ථිකය හරි කුඩායි. මේ කුඩාකම නිසා අපිට දරා ගැනීමේ ශක්තිය අවමයි. ඉතින් උදාහරණයක් හැටියට ගත්තොත් අපේ සම්පූර්ණ ඩොලර් ආදායම 23.4 බිලියන ඩොලර්. ඒ වගේම අපේ වියදමේ වෙනස පරතරය ඇවිල්ලා 4.5 බිලියන. ඉතින් මේ බිලියන 4.5ක වෙනස දිගටම අපේ අවුරුදු ගාණක් තුල උඩරි පහක් වෙලා ගිහිලා තියෙනවා කියලා එතුමා සඳහන් කරා. අපිට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන ආදායම අපිට ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ උඩ කොටස් පහක් තිබෙනවා. ඒ කොටස් පහ තමයි එකක් ඇවිල්ලා ටුවරිසම් සංචාරකයන්, අනිත් එක පිටරට වැඩ කරපු කට්ටියකින්. සංචාරකයන් අපිට ලැබෙනවා 3.6 බිලියන සංචාරක ව්‍යාපාරවල. ඒ වගේම පිටරට වැඩ කරලා අපිට මුදල් ලංකාවට එවන කට්ටිය බිලියන 6.7ක් වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපිට ගාමන්ස් වලින්, ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට අපනයනය කළා අපිට ලැබෙන 5.5 බිලියන. ඒ වගේම කෘෂිකර්මාන්තයෙන් 2.4 බිලියන, වෙනත් වලින් 3.8ක්. ඒ වගේම අපිට මේ පිටරට ආයෝජන වලින් අපිට 1.5 බිලියන තියෙනවා. ඒක තමයි අපිට ලැබිලා තියෙන ආයෝජනය. දැන් මේකේ තියෙන විශේෂත්වය තමයි වෙලා තියෙන ලොකුම ගැටලුව තමයි අපිට ටුවරිසම් සෙක්ටර්, ඒ කියන්නේ සංචාරක අංශය කඩා බැඳීම. එතනින් අපිට බිලියන 3.6ක් පමණ අහිමි වුණා. ඒ වගේම අපිට ඒ අවුරුද්ද 2021 9%ක වර්ධනයක් තිබ්බා. මේ පිටරට ඉඳන් අපිට මුදල් එන ආයෝජනේ. එතකොට ඇඳුම් අංශයේ තිබ්බා වැඩිවීමක් තිබ්බා. කෘෂිකර්මාංශයේ වැඩිවීමක් තිබ්බා. ඉතින් මුදල් පැමිණීම 120කින් විතර වැඩි වුණා. ඒක නිකන් අපිට ලොකු තෘප්තියක් වුණා. ඉතින් අපිට ඒක තිබුණාට අපිට ලොකු ගැටලුවක් තිබ්බා. අපිට එන්න තෙල් වැඩි, ගාස්තුව වැඩි වුණා. තෙල් වල යන වියදම වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපිට මුදල් ආයෝජන පිටරටින් එන එක අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ ඊනවීම තුල අපිට තියෙන ලොකුම ගැටලුව තමයි අපේ වියදම වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා දැන් එන්න. අපිට දැන් ලොකුම ගැටලුව වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේකට අපි වග කියන්න ඕනේ මං හිතන හැටියට. දැන් මුදල් අපේ රටට එන එක පිටරට පුද්ගලයන්ගෙන්, ඒ කියන්නේ වැඩ කරලා එන පුද්ගලයන්ගෙන් අපිට බැංකු හරහා තමයි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ආවේ. මෙතන දැන් තියෙන එක වැටිලා තියෙනවා. මොකද්ද හේතුව තියෙන්නේ? අපිම කතා කරලා බිය ගැන්වීම තුල, රටේ තියෙන බිය ගැන්වීම තුල මේගොල්ලන් මේ මුදල් එවන්නේ වෙන ක්‍රමවලට. ඒ කියන්නේ ඩොලර් ටික එහෙ තියලා ලංකාවේ රුපියල් මේ යනවා. හැබැයි ඩොලර් ටික පිටරට තියෙන්නේ. අපිට ඩොලර් ටික පැමිණෙන්නේ නැති කප්පයක් ඇවිල්ලා. මේක ඒ වගේම එක්ස්පෝර්ට් වෙලා හැම අංශයෙන්ම මුදල් ටික පිටරට යවන්න ක්‍රමවේද හොයා ගන්නවා. ඉතින් මේක තුලත් අපිට තවත් බලපාමක් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා අපිට මේ තත්ත්වයට එන්න. ඉතින් මේක තමයි. ඉතින් මේක උඩ අපිට ලොකු බලපෑමක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. තෙල් වියදම වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට මෙඩිකල් අංශය කියන්නේ මේවලට ගන්න එකට වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ හැම එකේම අපිට අයවැය පෙරතරය එන්න අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේකෙන් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ අපිට මොකද්ද ව්‍යාපාරයක් හැටියට කරන එකට ආණ්ඩුවෙන් ඩොලර් නැති හින්දා ඒගොල්ලන් විකල්ප ක්‍රම වගේක් කියනවා. ඩොලර් නැතුව ඉතින් LC අරිනකොට එහෙම බලන්න ක්‍රමවේද මාස 6ක් 8ක් කල්ගත වෙලා කරන ක්‍රමයක්. ඉතින් වෙනත් ක්‍රමවේද හොයන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ ඩොලර් ටික නැති හින්දා අපිට ආයෝජනය කරගන්න. ඒවා තමයි කතා කරේ. ඒ වගේම අපිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. අපිට මේ ඩොලර් ගන්න යනකොට අපි අරන් තියෙන ඩොලර් අරන් තියෙන. ඉතින් දැන් ඒක තමයි අපිට තියෙන මූලික ප්‍රශ්නේ. ඒ වගේම අපිට තියෙන මේකේ විසඳුම ඇටියට ක්‍රම වගේක් ගැන කතා කරා. ඒ ක්‍රමවල අපිට තියෙන එකම දෙයක් තමයි අපේ කොලෙස්ටරෝල් අඩු කරගන්න ඕනේ. කියන්නේ ෆැට් අඩු කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා මම කියන කොලෙස්ටරෝල් අඩු කරන්න කියන්නේ අපි ඉතින් අපි කන කෑම අවම කරගන්නවා කියන එක. කියන්නේ අපිට වියදම අඩු කරන ක්‍රමවේද අපි වලට යන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් අපේ ඒක එකක් කරන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට අපේ අපේ තියෙන ආර්ථිකය හඳුනාගෙන කොහොමද ක්‍රමවේද වලින් ඒ කරන්නේ? නැත්තම් ව්‍යාපාරය කුඩා කරන්න සලස්වන්න ඕනේ. මොකද අපිට මේ ටුවරිසම් කියන එක කවදද වෙන්නේ කියන එක අපි දන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් ආවත් හරි අපි යථා තත්ත්වයට එන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකෙන් අපිට ගොඩක් ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තව ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. අපි අරන් තියෙන මේ බොන්ඩ් කියලා. ඉතින් එතුමා කියලා දුන්න මේ බොන්ඩ් කියලා කියන එකයි මේ බැංකු වලින් ජාත්‍යන්තර ගණන් දෙක අතර වෙනස. බොන්ඩ් කියලා කියන්නේ අපි තනි පුද්ගලයෙක්ගෙන් ගත්ත ණය. අනිත් ඒවා බැංකුව වලින් ගත්තේ බොන්ඩ් එකකට ගත්ත බොන්ඩ් වල ගත්ත සල්ලි ටික තනි පුද්ගලයන් ගන්න හින්දා ඒක අපි නැවත ගෙවීමේ හරියටම ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. ඒකට කල් ගන්න බෑ. ඒකින්ද අපේ ගෙවීමක් තියෙන හින්දා අපි ලොකු ගැටලුවකට වෙන හින්දා අපේ තවත් ඩොලර් හින්දා පුහුණ වෙනවා. ඉතින් මෙතනදී අපි කළ යුතු දේවල් ටික බැලිය යුතුයි. ඉතින් ඒක ගැන කතා වුණා. ඉතින් ක්‍රමවේද ගැන කොහොමද කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. එතන කියපු දෙයක් තමයි ආණ්ඩුවට මේ ඩොලර් ගන්න නම් දිගු කාලීනව IMF එකට යන්න ඕනේ. හැබැයි මේ අපේ තියෙන රටේ තියෙන අපේ ලාංකික මම කියන්නේ මම මේක ඇතුළත් කරන දෙයක්. හැබැයි මම කියන්නේ ලාංකික මානසිකත්වයත් අපිට තියෙන දැනුමත් තුළ IMF එකෙන් අපේ තියෙන දේශපාලනික දේශගුණය තුළ IMF එකේ ණය ගන්න එක අමාරුයි කියලා එතුමා කියනවා. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ නීති වලට යටත් වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් අපිට නීති වලට යටත් වෙන්න බැරි කමක් තියෙන හින්දා IMF එකෙන් ගැනීම ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙනවා කියනවා. ඒකින් අපි යන ගමන තුළ අපි ඉතින් ව්‍යාපාරයේ හැටියට කරගෙන යනකොට එකක් බැලියොත් අපි කුඩා කරගන්න එකක් අපි කොහොමද විකුණන්නේ ඩොලර් වලින් කියන එක කිව්වා. ඒ කියන්නේ හැම වෙලාවෙම ඩොලර් වලින් ආදායම ලබා ගන්නත් කරන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒකෙන් සැහැල්ලු වෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ වගේම මධ්‍යම කාලීනව මේක මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් අපි බලන්න ඕනේ ක්‍රමෝපාය කොහොමද වැඩි ගානකට විගුණන ක්‍රමෝපාය. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ඉගෙනගෙන අපි ක්‍රමවේදයක් ඇති කරගත යුතුයි. මොකද අපිට ජාත්‍යන්තර ආයෝජන මුදල් ආයෝජනය ලංකාවට එන්න බෑ අමාරුයි. ඇයි එන්න අමාරු කියලා කිව්වේ කතාව තමයි මේ ඩොලර් කියනකොට ඒක ක්‍රමයක් එන එක ඒක අමාරුයි කියලා කිව්ව හේතුව තමයි අපිට ලංකාවේ දීර්ඝ කාලේ සැලැස්මක් නැහැ. අවුරුදු 5න් 5ට තමාට ඕන විදිවලට අපේ මේ පාලනයෙන් වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ වෙනස් වීම තුළ ආයෝජනය මුදල් ආයෝජනය කරන්න පුද්ගලයෙක් අවුරුදු 20කට ආයෝජනය කරන්න ආවොත් ඒ 5න් 5ට මාරු වෙන හින්දා ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඒ දිගු කාලින ලාභයක් උපයා ගැනීමේ මාර්ගයක් නැති හින්දා ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඒ දිවි ගැනීමක් නැහැ එන්න. ඒ වගේම කිව්වා අපේ රටේ තියෙන මේ ආර්ථිකේ මාකට් එක. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට තියෙන ප්‍රමාණය මේක මිලියන 21 කුඩා පරිමාණයේ තිබෙන හින්දා අපිට මේක කරන්න බෑ. ඉතින් අපි උපක්‍රමශීලී වෙන්න ඕනේ. අපි ලංකාවේ ඉඳන් අපේ ළඟ තියෙන රටවල් ඉන්දියාව ගත්තොත් ඉන්දියාවට අපි විකුණන්න කොහොමද ක්‍රමවේද හදා ගන්න ඕනේ. එතනින් අපිට ආදායම ගන්න කියලා. ඒක අපිට ගන්න පුළුවන් හේතුව තියෙන අපි භූගෝලීයව අපි හරි ස්ථානයක ඉන්නොත් ඒකේ වාසිය ගන්න ඕනේ කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් අපි මේ යන ගමන තුල අපි අයවැය පරතරය වැඩි. ඉතින් එතුමා කිව්වා මේක තමයි මේකෙන් බය ගන්න එකක් නෙමෙයි කියන්නේ මේ පරතරය මේව තමයි දැනගත යුතු කාර්ය අපේ ව්‍යාපාර කරගෙන යනකොට. ඉතින් ඒකයි මම හිතන්නේ සාරාංශගතව මට කියන්න පුළුවන් දේ කියන්නේ මම හිතන්නේ ඒ වගේම විශේෂයෙන්ම ණය මේ වාරික ගෙවීමේ කාලයක් දැන් ලඟ වෙලා තියෙන හින්දා මේ කාලය ඊටාම සියුම් කාලයක් අපි හරිම සූක්ෂම බුද්ධිමත්ව වැඩ කළ යුතුයි කියන්නේ. Thank you Tishma. Over to you.
Please. Please, can I be unmuted? Yes, okay, I am unmuted. Fantastic. All right, thank you very much to Mr. Dilan Silva for that Sinhala translation. And now we also have a Tamil translation. And to do the honors of the same, we have Mr. Thanidhi Kokulan to join us on screen.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். அதாவது இன்று நாங்கள் இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியினூடாக முதலாவதாக எடுத்துக்கொண்ட தலைப்பு என்னவென்றால் இந்த US டாலரினுடைய பாதிப்பிலிருந்து எவ்வாறு நாம் வெளிவருவது அது தொடர்பான ஒரு தகவல் பரிமாற்றமே இங்கு நடைபெற்றது முதல் தொடர்பினூடாக. அதாவது US டாலரினுடைய பாதிப்புக்கான முதலாவது காரணம் பணத்தை US டாலரினுடைய உட்பாய்ச்சலை விட வெளிப்பாய்ச்சலானது அண்மைய காலகட்டங்கள் அது அதிகரித்தமே இதற்கான முக்கியமானது ஒரு காரணமாகும். ஆகவே இதில் முக்கியமாக பணவீக்கம் மற்றும் வட்டி வீதம் ஆகிய இரு காரணிகளில் பிரச்சனைகள் உள்ள காரணத்தினால் இந்த US டாலரினுடைய பாதிப்பானது நம்முடைய நாட்டிற்கு ஏற்பட்டிருக்கின்றது. ஆகவே இதை நாம் எவ்வாறு சரி செய்து கொள்வது என்பதற்கு நாங்கள் மேற்கொள்ளக்கூடிய நடவடிக்கைகள் என்னவென்றால் நம்முடைய செலவுகளை எவ்வாறு கட்டுப்படுத்தி கொள்ளலாம் என்பது தொடர்பாக நாம் எதிர்வரும் காலங்களில் ஆராய்ந்து செயற்பட வேண்டிய ஒரு நிலைமைக்கு உட்படுத்தப்பட்டிருக்கின்றோம். அத்துடன் இந்த காலகட்டங்களில் நாம் இந்த பிரச்சனையில் அவரவர் பிரச்சனையிலிருந்து மீள்வதற்கு குறுகிய கால கடன் அல்லது இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட் பிளான், அதாவது முதலீட்டு எதிர்கால முதலீடுகள் சம்பந்தமாக எவ்வாறு செயற்பட வேண்டும் என்பது தொடர்பாக நாம் சிந்தித்து செயற்பட வேண்டும். மற்றும் கொலாபரேஷன், அதாவது கூட்டு முயற்சியாக நாம் இணைந்து எவ்வாறு அனைவரும் சேர்ந்து இந்த பாதிப்பிலிருந்து எம்மை மீட்டுக் கொள்ளலாம் என்பது தொடர்பாகவும் ஆராய வேண்டிய நிலைமைக்கு நாங்கள் அனைவரும் உட்படுத்தப்பட்டிருக்கின்றோம். ஆகவே இந்த கோவிட் நிலைமையானது தற்போது கோவிட் மற்றும் நாட்டினுடைய பொருளாதார நிலைமையானது தற்போது மீட்கப்படக்கூடியது ஒன்றல்ல, இது மீண்டும் தொடர்ச்சியாக செல்லக்கூடிய ஒன்றாகும். ஆகவே இந்த பிரச்சனையிலிருந்து நாம் வெளிவருவதற்கு புதுவிதமாக நாம் சிந்திக்க வேண்டிய நிலைமைக்கு நாம் அனைவரும் உட்படுத்தப்பட்டிருக்கின்றோம் என்பதை யதார்த்தமான உண்மை. நன்றி. தேங்க்யூ.
Yes, all right. Thank you very much for the Tamil translation as well. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving into our second presentation for today. Allow me to introduce to you our second speaker. Our speaker is Ms. Hiranti Fonseca. She is Assurance Partner, Ernst & Young. With over 20 years of experience at the Ernst & Young Colombo office, Hiranti has audit experience in several industries, including hotels, service insurance, and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. She was seconded to the Ernst & Young office in Miami, Florida, USA, where she worked with the assurance teams on a number of diverse assignments. Hiranti also has extensive knowledge on finance process excellence and also on process review and improvements and accounting policy developments in different groups of companies in Sri Lanka and Bhutan as the engagement partner. Hiranti is also involved in assessing processes for RPA effectiveness and managing the client expectations for automation projects. Hiranti's topic today is process improvement and transformation. She will be touching upon the digital agenda to identify improvement opportunities to generate ROI, cost savings, and improve performance. She'll also be doing an introduction to several key technologies. With that introduction, let's now welcome Hiranti Fonseca.
Thank you, Trishma. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We listened in the morning about how we need to adapt to the new normal. And we also said that we need to cut the fat. And the Sinhala translator said, okay, we need to watch out the cholesterol. So myself and my colleague Johan will speak on a very important aspect for organizations, that is process improvement. And we are going to talk about how or where are the areas that process improvement can take place, and if there are opportunities, how do you do it? And Johan will use very practical examples and demonstrate case studies on how we have assisted clients to carry out this process improvement and transformation to enable organizations to cut the fat and to bring in bottom line improvements. So if you look at an organization, a typical organization structure, you may have the board, or if it is a smaller entity, you may have the owner management leading the company. Then you will have your senior management assisting you, and you'll have the rest of the workforce. If you take a step back, and I believe that this is a very good opportunity for organizations to take a step back. Why? Because businesses are struggling whilst we need to, carry on business. It is also a great opportunity for us to revisit our processes, to ask ourselves, are we having the most efficient processes to carry out our business? And in that, if you see this third layer that we have in our organizations are doing a lot of manual work. Now, I have put down here a lot of manual work in relation to strategy, IT department, finance, HR audit teams. I have not put down here the operational areas, but believe me, operation areas are also a big significant area where we can improve our processes. So what do these layers do? If you take the operational area when it comes to invoicing, process payment, payment processing, purchase order processing, receipt process. These are major areas in organizations where we use a lot of manual work. We use a lot of paper, which adds to unnecessary cost and inefficiencies. So I must share with you that a lot of organizations are now taking this opportunity to revisit these processes, to bring in digital technologies to make the process more efficient. Now, a lot of you might think, okay, we cannot afford digital technologies at this point. But we have good news. Technologies that we are going to talk about today are not expensive technologies. When we talk of technologies, a lot of us think it's an ERP overhaul, which will cost us millions. But today we are not going to talk about those high value IT infrastructure. Johan will demonstrate certain freely available tools as well as tools that come at a very reasonable cost that you can use to make these efficiencies in your organization. So before I move on, I'll quickly tell you, if you are the managing director of an organization, you might have various reports coming to you. Or if you see our finance department, I'm an accountant, so guilty of this fact. We use a lot of reports, reconciliations, various budget monitoring work papers. All of these are done manually using teams of people. If you look at HR, starting from recruitment, processing of their payroll, and all the way up to their retirement, we have a huge process in place where a lot of human beings are involved in carrying out that process. These are areas where technology can be used in a small way to make the process very efficient. Just last week, one of my clients said, we have this HR head, and I want her to do some strategic initiatives for the company. But she's telling me that for these 5 days, she is doing the payroll, and she cannot be burdened with doing some strategic initiatives for the organization. Now, if you are the managing director, you might be thinking, why am I paying a high-level resource for 5 days each month? All she does is process the payroll. Does that make sense to you? See, again, processing of the payroll is a very routine task. If you can reorganization the manner in which the information flows to process the payroll, it can be done probably within half a day. And this managing director or the client is agreeing, yes, it can be done. Why don't we look at it? So today we are going to talk about how do you identify in an organization these problem areas, and what are the solutions that are there to address these problems? How do you release your high-level resources in an organization from this manual repetitive work which don't provide any value addition? Release them, support your strategy, support in your business growth, support in giving back a good return for the company. So how do you do this? Typically, our teams would go in and do an opportunity assessment. That is, we look at those pillars that I showed you earlier, like the HR, finance, IT, strategic pillars, operations. We go in and see how do you currently do your process. And I must tell you, our teams are complemented with IT technicians as well as finance personnel. So we are able to bring about an assessment which throws out efficient and effectiveness model which will enable you to bring in more value addition to the organization. So once you do this opportunity assessment, you will come up with processes that are highly automatable. Certain of these processes you will identify and say, these need to be re-engineered to enable you to go in for automation. Certain processes you might say, no, these are probably not suitable for automation. Then the next step would be for you to look at a framework or a solution framework and say, okay, you need to reorganize certain processes. Once you do that, what is the best technology? Processes that are already ready, what is the best technology? And in Johan's session, he will tell you, based on certain processes, you may use freely available tools that can be used to make the process efficient. Certain times, you may need to get a licensed software. Again, they are not very costly. You can get them at a lower, at a very reasonable rate to make your process more efficient. Thereafter, you come up with a roadmap. You come up with a strategy to say, okay, these are the ones that we are tackling first. These are the benefits. Again, very important. In this identifying of your solution framework and formulating the roadmap to your digital journey, you need to identify the return on investment, right? What we call the ROI or the return on investment. Identify the benefits and make a conscious call whether this is the best way for the organization to move forward. Otherwise, we see a lot of corporates taking a step in the digital journey. They don't do their opportunity assessment and they don't identify what are the most, what are the best frameworks that are available for this digital journey. If you don't do these two steps, chances are that you may not be very successful. So in order for you to make sure that you get the best solution, you need to carry out these two work steps. We'll move on to the next slide. Right. This is an example of how you need to do a process map and identify the areas, processes that are ready for digital transformation. And what should you probably defer for a later date? What should you cultivate? Meaning, what are the processes that you need to reorganize and then make it ready for digital transformation? So on this slide, I have put an example of a company where you have identified the processes. We have looked at the return on investment in terms of the saving, not monetary terms, but in terms of the human effort, the saving that is required. And of course, we have identified with the complaint and what is the most suitable technology that you need to do. So this is something that even an organization can do. But what we want to highlight is if you're going on this journey to improve your processes, please do these two steps. If you don't do it and just jump into the digital transformation, you might find that you are not getting the benefits that you were actually hoping for. Moving on. right? Again, I won't go into a lot of details, but this is where some of the savings can come in. The savings from hours, from staff, and various processes that have been identified that will give this savings. Now, a lot of us think, okay, if we digitalize companies, our staff will be redundant, or there'll be job losses. This is going to be a problem, and we don't want to do that. We have a different view. As I said before, it is not about really letting go of your staff. It is about reskilling them and using them for more strategic work, because the efficiencies that will be brought into these processes, as I said before, are very mechanical type of work. They don't require intelligence, right? Preparing a reconciliation, what do? You go to a particular system, take out data, take information from another system, start reconciling. You don't need human intelligence for that. But if you look at our organization, we use employees who are experienced, who are qualified to do this manual, repetitive, mechanical type of work. And they are not even happy doing that. That's why we see a lot of staff turnover in our organizations. But instead, we use technology to do that, and we make use of these individuals who have intelligence a part of our strategic process. We need to reskill them and make them part of our, the value addition part of the organization. Let's move on, Johan. Right. So I think I explained this to you. There's been a survey, and IT projects, IT transformations fail 25% of the time, and one reason is inadequate ROI. So you need to be conscious of this, and make that time to do a proper process evaluation before you jump in. Let's move on, Johan. If you are going to embark on a digital transformation, you need to keep a few things in mind. Identify a champion to lead this, and you must make sure that the leadership buy-in is available for this transformation. A lot of the time we see that the IT transformation is led by IT department. Again, not a good choice. You must let the operations lead IT transformation. They are the ones who are going through these processes day in, day out. They need to be a larger part of this IT transformation. Then the middle one, I reiterated so many times: identify the processes properly, make sure that they're ready for digital transformation, and then move in if they are ready at that time. Fourth one is very important. Keep employees informed on precisely how their jobs will be affected. I have to tell you, a lot of employees are very nervous when we go in for discussions on digital transformation, because they know somewhere down the line their job might be impacted. But this is where you need to have the change management in place. You must have the leadership giving the right message to your employees. We are not here to take away your jobs. We are here to qualitatively improve employee lifestyles. If you see your employees, working till 12 midnight, obviously that is not the best, the kind of life that an employee would like. So you need to communicate. You will have a better quality of life. And we will have a reskilling program in place, and organizations need to do that to make sure that you are part of the growth strategy of this organization. Some of the employees will need to be reskilled technically, because when these technologies are inbuilt into your processes, someone needs to take this forward. And your IT is not going to be sitting and every time a process change, your IT is not going to come in and do the configuration. So you will need to have a team of people within operations who are savvy in terms of manipulating, well, not manipulating, but making the required changes in these technologies. So that entire change management in the organization also needs to take place. So these are some of the aspects that I thought I'll discuss with you today. With that, I will hand you over to Johan, who will show you some practical examples in adopting digital technologies. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Hiranti, for that wonderful insight into your topic, which is process improvement and transformation. Once again, let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that we have Q&A a little later on. So make sure you keep your questions ready for Hiranti as well as the other speakers as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the singular translation of this presentation. Let's welcome Mr. Dilan Silva back on screen with the translation.
Thank you. අපිට මේ හිරන්ති අපිට කතා කරලා අපිට දැනුවත් කරා කොහොමද අපි වියදම අවම කිරීම සඳහා අපේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ ගලා යෑම ඒ කියන්නේ work flow එක කොහොමද අපි improve කරලා වියදම අඩු කරගන්න යන්නේ කියන එක. ඒකට මූලික හේතුවක් කිව්වා digital තාක්ෂණය තුලින් කොහොමද අපි ඒක කරන්නේ කියන එක. ඒක විශේෂයෙන්ම කිව්වා මේ digital තාක්ෂණයෙන් කොහොමද අපි ඒක පටන් ගන්න කරන්න කියලා. ඒක කරන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා අපි විශ්ලේෂණයක් කරන්න ඕනේ. කොහොමද එක එක ස්ථානවල කොහොමද මේ විශ්ලේෂණයෙන් අපි කොහොමද ඒක වැඩි දියුණු කරගන්න කියන එක හැම ස්ථානයක් ගැන කතා කරනවා. ඒ වගේම කතා කරා මේ ඩිජිටල් තාක්ෂණයේ වෙන්වීම තුල අපිට මේ වැඩි වියදමක් දැන් යන්නේ ඒක සරල විදිහට කරන්න පුළුවන් ක්‍රමවේද ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා කියන්නේ ඉදිරියට ඒක ගැන අනෙක් කතිකයක් කියලා දෙයි කියන එක. ඉතින් මේකේ උදාහරණයක් ගත්ත ගාම කියපු කතාවක් තමයි එතුමිය කිව්වා කතාවක් විශේෂයෙන්ම උදාහරණයක් හැටියට මේ එතුමියගේ HR ඩිපාර්ට්මන්ට් එකේ එක්කෙනෙකුට කිව්වා කියලා වැඩක් කරලා දෙන්න කියලා කිව්වා මේ මට දවස් 5ක් යනවා මේ පඩි හදන්න ඒ දවස් 5 ඉවරනාට පස්සේ මේක කරන්නම් කියලා. දැන් මේක කියපු ගාම යා පුදුම වෙලා යා ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති කරගත්තා. අපි කල්පනාකරන කාරණා අධ්‍යක්ෂකවරයා හැටියට අපි පරිපාලනයේ ඉන්න හැටියට මේක හරි පුදුම දෙයක් මේක මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ කියලා. දැන් මේක දවසකින් කරන්න පුළුවන් තාත්තේ ගැලීම ගැන තමයි එතුමිය කතා කරන්නේ. ඒ වගේම අපි මොන හරි ආයෝජනයක් කරනවා නම් ඒකේ ප්‍රතිලාභ අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් අපි ප්‍රතිලාභ ගැන අපි සැලකිලිමත් විය යුතුයි අපි ආයෝජනය කළා කරන එක. ඒ වගේම කිව්වා මේකෙන් තියෙන ලොකුම ප්‍රශ්නේ තමයි අපේ මේ වැඩ කරන සේවකයන් කොහොමද ඒක වෙනස් වෙන්නේ? මොකද ඒගොල්ලන් කියන අපේ බඩට ගහන තත්ත්වයට පැමිණෙන්නේ කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ බඩට ගහන තත්ත්වය කියන එක තමයි අපිට තියෙන ගැටලුව. එයා කිව්වා නෑ එහෙනම් අපිට ඒක කරන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා අපි පරිපාලකයන් හැටියට දැනුවත් කරන්න ඕනේ ජීවන රටාවම වැඩි දියුණු කරන්න තමයි අපි මේක කරන්න කියන්නේ. ඒක කරලා ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ සහයෝගය අරගෙන තමයි මේක කළ යුත්තේ කියන එක කිව්වා. ඉතින් විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ සම්පූර්ණ දෙයක් කිව්වේ මේ ගලා යාම තුලින් විශේෂයෙන්ම කිව්වේ ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ work flow එක නැත්නම් මේ ගලා යාම මේ process එක ඒක එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ ක්‍රියාශීලී ක්‍රමවේදය හැම ස්ථානයකම අධීක්ෂණය කරලා අපිට පුළුවන් ද කරන්න කියලා. සාමාන්‍ය කම්පියුටරයක් ගත්තම රටාව පොදු සාධකයේ සම්භාවිත ගත්තම එකම රටාව යන දෙයක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒක අපිට මේ ඩිජිටල් තාක්ෂණයට ගන්න පුළුවන් ක්‍රමවේද තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ දෙයක් තමයි කිව්වේ. ඉතින් අපි කොහොමද ඒක පරීක්ෂා කරලා බලලා ඒ ක්‍රමවේදයට ඇතුළත් කරලා අවම කරගන්න. මේකේ මූලික පරමාර්ථය තමයි වියදම අවම කිරීමේ පරමාර්ථය. ඒ වගේම කිව්වා මේ සේවකයන්ට අපි මේ සේවකයන්ව යොදවන්න පුළුවන් අගය එකතු කිරීම සම්පත. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලන්ව ඇතුළත් කරගන්න පුළුවන් අපේ ක්‍රමවේදයේ සහ අපේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ මේ අගය එකතු කිරීම. ඒක තමයි සාරාංශගතව කිව්වේ. Over to you, Trishma.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you very much to Mr. Dilan for the Sinhala translation. And now for the Tamil translation, let's invite Mr. Thanidhi Kokulan.
ஆம், நன்றி. நாம் தற்போது இந்த தொடரில் பார்த்தது என்னவென்றால், எப்படி ஐடி தொழில்நுட்பத்தினூடாக நம்முடைய ப்ரோசஸ் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட், அதாவது தொழில்நுட்ப சார்ந்த உதவியோடு எவ்வாறு நம்முடைய உற்பத்தி திறனை மேம்படுத்திக் கொள்ள முடியும் என்பதை பார்த்தோம். அதற்கு அடிப்படையாக குறிப்பிடப்பட்டது ரிக்வயர்மெண்ட் கேதரிங், அதாவது தகவல்களை சேகரித்தல், அனாலிசிஸ் மற்றும் இம்ப்ளிமெண்டேஷன் ஆகிய 3 படிநிலைகளை நாங்கள் செயற்படுத்துவதாக நாம் நம்முடைய உற்பத்தி தரத்தையும் உற்பத்தி தொழிற்பாட்டையும் நாம் மேம்படுத்திக் கொள்ள முடியும். நன்றி. தேங்க்யூ.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much to Mr. Thanidhi Kokulan for the Tamil translation. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to now introduce to you our third and final speaker today. Our speaker is Johan Anderson, and Johan is Financial Accounting Advisory Services Senior Manager, Intelligent Automation and Data Analytics at Ernst & Young. His diverse experience at Ernst & Young includes process standardization and process improvement excellence for business process automation. He also has knowledge in analysis of processes with specialized banking expertise in finance, operations, and trade. In addition to this, he has also managed and led finance transformation projects, inclusive of managing client expectations, planning using agile framework, improving the overall process design, and ensuring a successful deployment. His topic today is adopting digital technologies, and he will be touching upon methodologies to transform processes and managing the implementation of process improvement technologies. With that, let's now welcome our third speaker, Johan Anderson.
Thank you, Trishma, and good morning to all the participants. Right, so I'll start this presentation by explaining what this paragraph mentions. So it says, we stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. And this was said in 2016. So this really speaks volume because it talks about a technological revolution. And I just want you to think about that, because at the moment we are going through a digital transformation. Some people call it the 4th industrial revolution, because it's where you're transforming everything you do with technology. Everything is linked. And if you don't change or you don't adapt technology, most probably what happened to a company like Nokia can happen to your businesses as well. So keeping that as the theme, I'll move on. So first of all, why do you need to adopt digital technologies? So all these points that I'm talking to you is from a process improvement point of view. And also when we say automation, we don't talk about the physical robots or the moving robots. It's more from a desktop automation point of view, where you automate what's on your PC or something similar to chatbots. So first of all, when you talk about technology for your company, there's 2 types of reasons why you need to adopt digital technologies. First is automation. Hiranti already explained to you what exactly automation is and the whole point of doing an automation. So the whole reason you want to automate your process is because you're trying to save costs which you would need to pay a human to do the process, and for which you can probably use the human to do something much more productive. So which means that in turn will cause you an improvement in your bottom line. And the main benefit of using automation is the fact that if you take a bot and you get the bot to do the same process which a human does, the bot will be able to work 24 hours in a day for the rest of the year. There won't be any holidays. There won't be any rest period. It will be just non-stop work. So the productivity is 100%. Then moving on, the other reason for you to adopt digital technologies is from an analytics point of view, or it's called data analytics. So why do you need to analyze your data? First of all, you need to monitor your business. And the best way to monitor your business, I mean, if you had the right technology, you should be able to do it with a click, where through just a few clicks, you should get all the insights that you need. And why that is important is because you can understand your current state of the business. So for example, currently, Mr. Jayasinghe explained about how you need to survive in the short run and how you need to plan, how you need to forecast. So if you have a data analytics measure in place, with just a few clicks, you'll be able to understand, how your company is doing, what the future looks like,